Hello, friends, and welcome to this edition of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. I am your host, Paul Hudrick, and we are here to break down Game 1, Sixers, Wizards. Sixers coming away with the victory, and here with me to help me break it down is from NBC Sports Philadelphia, my former colleague and good friend, Noah Levick. Noah, thank you so much for joining me to break down Game 1.
Yep, thank you for having me. It was an adjustment for us, but a fun one. Being back at Wells Fargo Center with 50% capacity and a lot of energy and excitement for Game 1 in that building, to be sure.
Definitely. It was, I got to give the, 11,000 or so people that were there a lot of credit, man. That place was loud. And, we're not, like you said, we're not used to it because we've been dealing with either no fans or very little fans throughout this entire season. So it was cool. It was a welcome change to have that kind of energy and that atmosphere and all that. I'm sure it felt different for the players. And Doc Rivers noted it obviously as well. Made that joke about how he felt like maybe they were fudging the numbers. Maybe it was a little bit more than 11,000. But the Sixers do win. A little bit of a struggle early, which I think we both expected, considering the Wizards had played very highly competitive basketball last week in two separate games, whereas the Sixers had the week off. I tend to agree with Doc Rivers where he said, given the choice between playing those kind of intense playoff atmosphere games as opposed to having a week off, he'd take the week off. I think that is correct for the Sixers especially. They've earned that right by being the number one seed. Off the top, I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We definitely want to touch on, the day that Tobias Harris had, Joel Embiid, and getting in foul trouble, but overcoming that and playing really well in the second half. And definitely going to address Ben Simmons and kind of his the dichotomy of his performances and the way people are breaking it down. But I just want to start right off the top, and that could be, if that's the main thing you had as your takeaway, just your main takeaway from Game 1 and kind of what you saw out there.
Yeah, Ben Simmons, I think this game was the quintessential, this is why he's so polarizing sort of performance, which you're allowed to see him however you see him. I mean, to me, it's a little unfortunate that he's so polarizing just because I think you see yesterday he can be many things at once. Like, to get the kind of bad stuff out of the way, he shot very poorly. He was 3 for 9 from the field, 0 for 6 from the foul line. The free throw shooting, I think, is especially concerning because he was around 53% after the All-Star break. So sure, 0 for 6 isn't typical for him, but it's not coming out of nowhere. And he has recently regressed in that area, which is a rather key area for him. But look, 15 assists, which were his most in a game since December of 2019, 8 offensive rebounds, which was a career high. And you just see that he is very valuable in many ways besides scoring. The Sixers are obviously a better team when he is exploiting advantages in speed and strength and driving hard to the rim and drawing and making free throws and doing all these things that I'm sure many fans want him to do on a consistent basis and are frustrated that he doesn't. But, in addition to all the great stuff, I touched on with the offensive rebounding and the setting up three-point shooters, he held Bradley Beal when he guarded him to 1 for 6 shooting and forced 3 turnovers. And I thought was especially impressive with his off-ball defense, like really sticking to him tightly and being super committed to this star assignment, but also not being exposed to backdoor cuts or anything like that. So I think Ben Simmons is always a fascinating person to cover because he's so unique. And I think yesterday was the perfect example of that. And look, the bottom line is in my opinion, he's a big reason why they won the game. Like, the positives very clearly outweighed the negatives in yesterday's game. Perhaps that is not or will not always be the case, but he helped them win a playoff game, and it was his first playoff game in over 2 years, after being out with the left knee surgery last year. So There are some positive things to build off, and then there are some negative things that the Sixers will hope are not a trend.
And the 15 assists, I believe that's the second highest total in franchise history in a playoff game. Behind Iverson and Cheeks had 16. So yeah, I mean, that's not a small number. That's a big number. And I think 15 and 15, the first to do that since Wilt Chamberlain. Is that correct as well? So, I mean, that's pretty unbelievable company. So that's, say whatever you want about context and all that. That's really impressive. That's historical stuff. And yeah, of course. I mean, you already pointed out the obvious with the negative. And yeah, the shooting from the field does not concern me nearly as much as the 0 for 6 from the line, because they could have put that game away a whole lot sooner if he goes, to your point, 3 of 6, and shoots, his normal, like around that 50% clip. They would have been fine. Wouldn't have been ideal, but it would have been better than 0 for 6. And I just when I look at it now, I see there's a formula that has worked for them all season. I don't know that it's going to work all throughout the playoffs. That's kind of what we're going to have to find out. The only way to find out is by playing these games. And that formula of Joel Embiid is Joel Embiid. That's the focal point of your offense. He's going to score a ton of points. Scored 30 despite the foul trouble. It's so funny. I looked out of the box score. I'm like, he still scored 30 points. It's unbelievable that he can just do that. And it doesn't even feel like it, because that's what he averaged, right? He averaged damn near 30 for the regular season. So he averages 30. So it's like, oh, cool. Joel Embiid, 30 points. And Tobias, not 37 points a game, but clearly he has done an excellent job all season of adding that supplemental scoring and being that guy that, when they need offense, they can go to him. The all bench lineup with him didn't fare that great yesterday, but it's had its good runs throughout the season. And in the fourth quarter, when teams have keyed on Joel Embiid, double team, triple team, whatever, Tobias has done a really nice job in stepping up in those situations as well. Thought he ran out of gas on Sunday in the second half. They didn't play for a week. He played 38 minutes. So, I mean, that's, clearly I thought he just kind of lost it a little bit, ran out of gas. I don't think it was necessarily – he got good looks, got the looks that were there that he was hitting in the first half, just kind of missed them in the second. And I think that's part of it was just legs. But anyway, when I talk to the formula, those two guys scoring, Danny Green and Seth Curry make shots. I mean, that's it for them. They're going to get open looks. When they get them, they need to hit them. Didn't do it in the first half, did it in the second half. You saw the difference. And then Ben just needs to do what he did. I think what you saw was the formula that worked for them all season long in play. You don't need Ben Simmons to score points. As long as Joel Embiid and Tobias are doing their thing, as long as Danny Green and Seth Curry are making shots, that's the perfect way to surround Ben Simmons and for this whole thing to work. And it's those, the 15 assists, it wasn't just like, oh, here's a pass to a guy who's wide open and it's an open shot. No, there were a lot of high degree difficulty plays. The two that stand out, the George Hill, that unbelievable bullet pass, looked like a slant pattern from a wide receiver. George Hill actually does a hell of a job catching it, gathering it, and then finishing at the rim. And there's another big pass. Oh, the one to Tobias, where Tobias has that backdoor cut and he threads that bounce pass. I mean, that is a difficult pass to make, and he makes it. And there's few guys in the league, especially at that size, that can make that kind of play. And then, the defense, you already touched on it, especially, Bradley Beal really got going in that third quarter, and they did, Ben Simmons did a good job of just making sure he didn't take the game over. He certainly kept the Wizards in the game with that run. And then I thought him and Joel Embiid together, really the way they handled the pick and rolls with Bradley Beal and they handled the drives, I thought they were excellent together in that third quarter. And I love that you pointed out, too, that off-ball defense, because I noticed that as well. Bradley Beal, before he became kind of the guy we know, that's what he was really good at. He was really good at that off-movement, shooter. That was kind of his role when it was him and John Wall at their peak. He's added more of those other nuances to his game, but that's where he is always, that's where he's always been very good, is kind of that off-ball movement. And I thought Ben Simmons was excellent, kind of corralling that and not letting him, use screens and fighting through it, and really did a good job off the ball. My biggest takeaway would probably be just Tobias Harris and the job he did we do have to talk about the fact that the Wizards aren't a great defensive team, and I thought that was part of it. But you still got to give Tobias credit for exploiting the mismatches he got. I thought there is clearly a strength difference between him and Rui Hachimura. Rui Hachimura is a young guy, still, I still think has a chance to be a very good player. But that physical, that play strength, I think Tobias just has it more than Rui at this point. And then when Tobias got his mismatches, the Wizards are going to go with that small lineup. It's what's worked for them, but they're also going to switch. And when they switch, Tobias is going to get mismatches. And to your point as well, Ben helped create a lot of those mismatches in certain situations. So I'm curious what you think about, do you think with Tobias, how much of it was Tobias doing an excellent job hunting those mismatches, getting to his spots on the floor, and how much of it was, the Wizards really just defensively not being equipped to handle a player like him, or really, almost any player, like not any player, but, the player of his caliber, Joel Embiid's caliber, Ben Simmons' caliber. How much of it, would you weigh that after watching game one?
Probably somewhere in the 50-50 range, which was a little better than I thought. I'm working through kind of a rewatch now and noticed one play that I thought was nice, where the Sixers just pushed the ball down the floor quickly. Tobias got a cross match against the much, much smaller Raul Neto. Just said, okay, give me the ball here at the right elbow. Methodically, backed him down, shot over him. Then another play that I liked, where he got a back screen from Seth Curry, kind of sealed Neto under the rim. Ben Simmons threw a nice lob up, kind of high pointed, to use a football sort of analogy there, and put the ball in. So I thought those plays were Harris being super aggressive and also just being smart about recognizing when he had advantages. Some of it most definitely was the Wizards switching, probably too frequently, and also just the fact that the initial matchup, as you said, of Harris versus Hachimura clearly seems to favor Tobias Harris. So they don't feel great about that matchup in the first place and are just very willing to switch in general. And their rim protection against him wasn't very good either. I mean, some of those drives were, subsequent layups were a lot easier than you expect for a typical NBA playoff game. But give him a lot of credit. I mean, it's not easy to score 28 points and a half in any situation. And he was awesome yesterday in that first half. As you said, faded in the second, but overall, a star performance. His most points ever in a playoff game. I believe it was just 2 away from his career high for a game ever. So you continue to get the impression that this is an ascendant player who is very comfortable with this team, with the role, as you mentioned, with this offense, with this head coach, and a lot of things are coming into place for him in a positive way. As far as whether this is sustainable throughout the playoffs, certainly not to this level, and certainly you'd expect that a team, in the next round, assuming the Sixers get there, like the Knicks or the Hawks, will be a more difficult challenge for him. But I do think he's become better this year at knowing exactly how and when to use his physical advantages, whether it's agility or strength. And I also think it's a real asset that he's improved as a passer. So it doesn't feel like when he gets downhill, the only option is to shoot the ball. If his own shot is not there, he's quite comfortable passing, and I think has become better at it, over the course of this season. So obviously a great first step in the playoffs for him, and I have a decent level of confidence that he'll be a good postseason player for the Sixers, if not a 37 points per game player.
Yeah, the word you used that really stuck out to me, and when comparing him, this year and, notably Sunday, compared to last year or even the year before that, is aggressive. I thought part of his problem last year against the Celtics is, granted, much better defensive team in that Celtics team than this Wizards team they're facing, but he didn't look, and the whole team, other than Joel Embiid last year, really, but he looked passive, and he looked passive a lot at times last year. I thought opportunities or shots where he passed it up, and then when he kind of got his looks, he didn't look comfortable, or I think what Doc Rivers did with him in LA and what he's done with him here, and where maybe Brett Brown kind of fell short, was just with, all right, Tobias, where do you want the ball? Where do you feel good? Like, what is the best? Where are the best places we can put you to best use you? And granted, Doc had an advantage over Brett Brown in that he already coached him for a while, so we already kind of knew some of those things, going into this experience with Tobias. But I think that relationship has been big in that regard, and I think that comfort has led to Tobias being a more aggressive basketball player. I thought it was interesting. He talked about, the opener. He struggled against the Wizards in that opener, and I think a lot of people were pretty concerned, because he flat out, and Tobias will tell you that, he wasn't very good last year, especially in the postseason. He wasn't very good. So then the first thing you see of him in the regular season is that performance, and it started to raise some flags. And even I think like the first couple of games, Noah, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the first couple of games, he wasn't particularly great or noticeable in those games. And then he just kind of took off. He got hot, and he just was pretty consistently, borderline all-star caliber player throughout the rest of the season. And I think that's what it is. I think a big chunk of it is that comfortability with Doc Rivers, and Doc Rivers understanding this is where I need to put Tobias for him to be at his best. And I think that's the one thing I have to give Doc Rivers the most credit for, at least when it pertains to Tobias Harris, is that he has really grown, he's really grown Tobias helped Tobias grow as a scorer and get to those spots on the floor where he feels comfortable, and that's made him a more aggressive player and made him a better scorer, I feel like, offensively. And with Tobias, you have to give him credit. The one of the biggest reasons he kind of had that opportunity to flourish in the first half, and that they needed him to flourish, was because Joel Embiid picks up those three early fouls, gets in foul trouble, doesn't play much in the second half, or first half, excuse me. And then the second half, he was just sensational, especially closing the game out when it kind of seemed like the game was maybe teetering a little bit. He just, I think at least three in a row, just big baskets, little fadeaways, that one-legged fadeaway that he's hitting so many big moments throughout the year. It reminded me a little bit of that Heat game very early in the season, was basically him playing with four guys who shouldn't be playing at that point. And he scored 40 plus in that game. And it just felt like the end of that game where it didn't matter what the Heat did. He just needed to get to a spot. He needed this much space to get to that fadeaway, and then he hit it. And the one thing we just discussed before the pod, and I'm curious your take on it, is what I saw out of the Wizards and why I think Joel Embiid is going to be able to do what he wants in the series is I don't think when those double teams came that they were very good. I thought they were obvious. I thought Joel Embiid could find them very easily, and he's gotten so much better that you can't do that with him now. You need to surprise him. It needs to be like a kamikaze approach where a guy just needs to come screeching at him out of nowhere, or is doomed to fail. So I'm just curious what you kind of saw in that regard yesterday, and if you think there is an adjustment the Wizards can make, or if you think this is just kind of is what it is, and Joel Embiid, should have kind of his way in this series.
Yeah, what I've kind of settled on as like the best bet at stopping Joel Embiid is varied and unpredictable double teams. And I think we all know the Toronto Raptors are the blueprint for that. And part of why that's easier said than done is you need to have the personnel to execute that type of approach. So part of it is it helps if you have long active defenders. It also just helps to have like aggressive hard-nosed guys like a Fred VanVleet or a Kyle Lowry, who, whether it's digging down to double Joel Embiid when he doesn't expect it, or scrambling desperately to close out to the shooters who are momentarily open off his double teams, are just going to be very committed to very aggressive defense against Joel Embiid and all that that entails in order to slow him down. And I just don't think the Wizards have the weapons. I agree, they seemed easy to read and they looked easy to read. He did somehow accumulate 5 turnovers, which surprised me a little looking at it, at the end of the game. But I also had the same impression that he had a handle of where everything was coming from. Seemed like
those were offensive fouls, I believe, right?
Right. I can't remember me like he was double teamed and that led to him making a bad pass or not seeming aware of, where his outlets were or anything along those lines. It seemed like they thought, kind of doubling from the baseline and at least stopping one of the fadeaway options was, a decent route to go, but that didn't look especially promising, frankly, for the Wizards. So, yeah, I would expect him to continue to be very effective this series. He averaged 30 points in the regular season against them, shot over 60% from the floor, and was 27 for 28 from the foul line. And yesterday he was 12 for 13. So that is 39 for 41 from the foul line in 4 games this season against the Washington Wizards. I thought obviously the tightly officiated nature of the game hurt him in the first half in the sense that he picked up the 3 fouls, but overall, the fact that he was drawing free throws helped a lot because that's a huge part of what makes him a great offensive player. And I would imagine he continues to do that effectively throughout the series. And yeah, I think the Miami game you bring up where I think Dakota Mathias hit a go-ahead 3 is a great example of the variety of counters they have against like whatever a defense throws at them with Embiid this year. I think the main wrinkle is just using him in those delay actions at the top of the key as opposed to he always has to get the ball on the low block, or it seems like often, it was just the left block last year. That was kind of the default option. Now he can conduct things from the top of the key. He feels comfortable reading the defense from that spot on the floor. And this guy is an incredible jump shooter. You don't even need the caveat of for a 7-footer. He's just an amazing shooter. As you mentioned, he had 3 made jumpers within a 70-second stretch there. I think it was from 2:54 to 1:44 left in the game, and that sealed the deal. So, yeah, I don't think the outlook for Washington is especially good in this series. I think the one twist that I could see them potentially throwing at the Sixers is just using Daniel Gafford a lot more. I think he's their most athletic of the trio of centers. I think he was
my guy,
the best of the 3. He's the best of the 3 yesterday. So I don't know, maybe you give him 26, 28 minutes a game and use the other guys a little more sparingly and you see if that has any impact. But as far as what you need to do with the double teaming to actually make Joel Embiid struggle, the Wizards just don't seem to have what's necessary on that category.
Yeah, Daniel Gafford is my guy, as you know. I was very high on him coming out. I thought he would have been a nice fit here as a backup 5 for Joel Embiid. I would say the issue if you're the Wizards, and I think Scott Brooks knows this, is if it is another tightly officiated game, Daniel Gafford might foul out in 10 minutes. Yeah. But he did. I agree with you that actually I thought Gafford. I was curious to see kind of how Washington would. I knew they were obviously going to throw all 3 guys at him. I was curious to see who would be the most effective, and I thought it would be Lopez just because he's the experienced guy. He is physical. He's not afraid to play physically in the post. But I thought Gafford was their best guy. I really do. I mean, it's Joel Embiid. So at the end of the day, no one is really a good match for him one-on-one. But I thought Gafford, like you said, with the athleticism, and if he can stay straight up and not foul, he's got a chance to be the best of the 3. With that said, I do not envision a way for them to stop him. I don't know. And I think that what you point out too with the personnel, yes, Nick Nurse is great with that. He's got a great scheme in Toronto, and what he does to Joel Embiid and just the erraticness of those double teams clearly throws him off. But you got to have the horses. You got to have the players that can do it. And yeah, I just don't see the Wizards as having that. I think they use Westbrook kind of a lot. They had him guarding Simmons, and then they kind of had him as the guy. And that's probably the best option of the players they have, but still not a great one, really. And Joel Embiid, with all due respect to Russell Westbrook, Joel Embiid can see over him and can find those open shooters. And as you pointed out, I don't think the rest of the roster is good enough to recover and not find Seth Curry and Danny Green in their spots, which they've been so good at finding throughout the season. The last thing I want to touch on, and very curious to know your thoughts, because it's something that I think has been talked about a lot, is the bench and the rotation. And I think we were all very curious to see what Doc Rivers would do. Would he go to those all-bench lineups? Who would kind of be his top guys? And I think to an extent, it went the way that we kind of thought. I thought all along the locks were Dwight Howard, who played more than, clearly more than Doc Rivers would have liked because of Joel Embiid being in foul trouble. I thought George Hill was a lock. I thought Matisse Thybulle was a lock. And then I thought Shake would kind of be the ninth guy, but, would kind of be in and out. And then I thought it would be 9. I didn't think he would go 10 or 11, but he did. He stretched it out. I'm curious to know if he wanted to go 10 or if, the cold shooting to start made him want to go to Korkmaz. Clearly, in the first half, he only used Maxey because Seth Curry goes down. But then Maxey, on his first touch, breaks Ish Smith's ankles and gets that N1, and that seemed to earn him some second half minutes. So, for you, what were you kind of surprised by? What were your kind of biggest takeaways? And what do you think we see going forward? Is he will it maybe scale back to 9? Will it stay at 10? Will he kind of continue to play 11 and just kind of feel it out?
Yeah, for a long time, I was pretty sure it would just be the 9. I think, in my opinion, I guess I'd probably agree with you. Shake Milton would be the lowest, on the totem pole of those 9, but it seems like they had 4 reliable bench players, and the other 2 were more question mark situational kind of guys. And I think that's largely how I saw it panning out. To your question about Korkmaz, I saw that. I mean, I can't get in Doc Rivers' head, but I saw that almost entirely as like the team started 1 for 11 from 3-point range. Let's get, Furkan some open shots and hope he makes them. And he didn't. He had 3 good looks and was 0 for 3. And then I don't believe appeared in the second half because other
Correct.
guys were making shots and his skill set wasn't especially valuable given that. As you said, Tyrese Maxey, it was clear that was entirely a byproduct of Seth Curry leaving with, I think, 142 left in that first half after the collision, having the win kind of knocked out of him there with Neto. So, yeah, it's hard to gauge definitively because of those somewhat unique circumstances. My guess is it's probably 9 for game 2, but there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of willingness to turn to Korkmaz or Maxey should there be anything that might, suggest that they'd be helpful. So even whether that's, Shake Milton in the second unit kind of look a little sluggish against the Wizards zone, maybe Tyrese Maxey can do a better job, penetrate the gaps of that zone, just be decisive, push the pace, play less half-court offense, etc. Again, with Korkmaz, maybe he's a guy who could theoretically be a zone buster. You can find a reason if you're looking for a reason to play 11 guys, and there were legitimate reasons to play numbers 10 and 11 yesterday. But I still see it as there are those 4 foundational players, and then beyond that, it's not quite as much of a sure thing. But I think Tyrese Maxey, every time he plays, he helps his cause, especially, his last performance before this was a 30-point regular season finale game where he was just brilliant, even, made a couple threes, which we always laugh about because we know the fan base loses their mind when Maxey makes the 3. And understandably thinks about what that could mean for his future and et cetera. But yeah, he played, very well in his first brief playoff action, and I'm sure he will get opportunities down the line. I'm not sure exactly when they will arise. And look, if he continues to play well, and it's something where Shake Milton and or Korkmaz are not playing so well, maybe he kind of really pushes himself into the every night guys. I don't necessarily think that that's likely to happen, but it wouldn't shock me either, just the way things are trending. I think we're clearly moving in that direction with Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, and you and I talked about it a lot before the playoffs started, and kind of when and how, and with him in the rotation. And it's funny because for a minute, it kind of felt like he was just all right. Hey, he had a nice beginning to his rookie year, but now it's hit the wall, and we'll see him next season almost. You know what I mean? That's the kind of vibe it felt. But to his credit, he really, when he got his opportunities in the second half, not only was he good, he just showed improvement. And to have that much improvement in season as a 20-year-old rookie on a team that's the 1 seed, that's really impressive. And to your point, I think that is part of the reason he's earned the opportunity. Like I think, I thought it was impressive on Doc Rivers' part that he kind of rewarded Maxey. He said, you know what? He made a really nice move. He kind of gave us a little jolt there. I'm going to let him ride in the second half and see what he does. I think we could, and, talk about, using his energy and his speed and his decisiveness. I think that word that you used is probably the word that I think I like about him most, especially in this team, is he is decisive. He gets the ball and he makes a move, and he doesn't hold it. The ball doesn't stop at him. He either makes a move to the basket or passes it. And I think sometimes on this team, when they're struggling offensively, I think that's part of their problem. I think sometimes guys can be a little indecisive. So a guy like him helps. The ability to penetrate and get to the basket, as you talked about, whether it's against the zone or not, I think is invaluable, especially on this team with the guys they have. There's really no other player that can do that to his level. And it's something they've really lacked throughout the Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons era. So to have that unique skill set, I think, is big. And we talked about the idea before the playoffs started, like, if they play a team like a Charlotte where maybe they lack a little bit of energy, Max is a good guy to go to. And I thought against this Wizards team and how poorly they played in transition early, I thought Maxey was a big factor in that as well in the second half, because he gets back on defense. He's fast and he's 100 miles an hour up and down both ends of the floor. And as he got, a little bit out in transition, I thought I think that is an element that he brings that, is huge and could be huge. And we didn't even touch on the fact, I thought it was interesting that with George Hill, it's clear George Hill is the guy. Like, he is the guy off the bench. He is the sixth man right now. And to end the season, that wasn't really the case. Doc Rivers really kind of mixed it up, and different guys playing different minutes. And it's clear to me, though, I know it's only one playoff game, but it's clear to me that George Hill is the guy that Doc Rivers trusts, and I think for good reason. Especially at the end of the game as that defensive substitution, he did a really good job contesting that Bertans three that would have been a big shot in the final couple minutes of the game that Bertans winds up missing it off the side of the backboard because George Hill gave him a really good challenge on it. So I don't know how you view it, but to me, it looks like Doc Rivers is clearly saying George Hill is my guy. That's the guy who's going to be the one that I count on the most off the bench.
I think that's most likely how things will play out. I'm not sure it's 100% set in stone quite yet. I've liked George Hill and his game for a very long time. He's an intelligent player who does a lot of things well, even if, especially at this stage of his career, he's not consistently making spectacular plays. He's always just on the right spot in the floor, always aware of what the team needs, what the situation in the game is, and is someone, very importantly, in the context of the playoffs, who you can trust late in the game because even though he's not the most imposing physically, he holds up pretty well against, most guys 1 through 3. And he's going to make sound decisions if you put the ball in his hands, and if he gets an open jump shot, he has a decent chance of making it. So that this is why they got him. He checks a lot of those boxes that you want for a quote unquote playoff player. And I think the patience that they showed with him in the injury, and the fact that they trusted that, it wasn't catastrophic, this injury situation, just got to give him a little bit of time and he'll be the player he has been in the past. Looks like they're going to be rewarded for that. Just as far, of course, the labels of who's the sixth man or the seventh man don't really matter. It's who closes games, it's who plays in what situations, it's who executes, important roles on the team. I'm just wondering, like Matisse Thybulle, is there a way to play him more? The situation yesterday was tough because Doc Rivers apparently thought it was necessary to do this kind of rigid, okay, Joel Embiid is out, Dwight Howard is my center, as opposed to, as we've talked about before, doing something maybe a little more unconventional where Ben Simmons or a smaller player is your center. So if Dwight Howard's your center, it's very hard to play Matisse Thybulle a lot of minutes, and it's not a good idea to play Matisse Thybulle, Ben Simmons, and Dwight Howard a lot of minutes. We have a lot of evidence to support that. But in my mind, especially in this kind of series where you have two clear top perimeter threats on the other team in Beal and Westbrook, I wonder if there is a way to play Matisse Thybulle more than 14 minutes a game. This guy he's an all defensive team caliber player. And I get that he is not good offensively, even though, there were little hints here and there over the latter half of the season that he was improving his driving and his cutting and all that. Overall, he's not a good offensive player, but it would sure be nice to play him a little bit more, if it's possible, and to really not waste his talent. So that's my other kind of big picture thought on the bench. And I'm not prepared to make any huge judgments on that, just because the whole foul trouble situation and how that threw all their plans out of the window. But definitely something I'll be watching, how many minutes he's playing, who will be matching up against, in those sorts of storylines. Something else we've talked about throughout the season, just relatedly, is I'm not so convinced that Dwight Howard is going to be able to play in every single playoff game, or that it will be a good idea to play him in every single playoff game. I don't think this is the series where massive deficiencies will necessarily be exposed. The Wizards don't have a stretch five who's going to, burn Dwight Howard for 5 threes a night or anything like that. But, maybe down the line, if they were to play a team like Milwaukee, I think there are serious question marks there with Dwight Howard. But certainly having a player who's been in a ton of these high stakes games in George Hill and tends to fare well in those situations, that's a huge, huge plus.
Excellent point you make with Thybulle, and I'm curious. I guess this is a question that maybe we should have asked Doc Rivers. Maybe we can ask him tomorrow, but do we think maybe it could have just been an outlier? You know what I mean? Because of the foul trouble of Joel Embiid and having to go Dwight Howard for so many minutes, and having to, when Joel Embiid is up and running and not in foul trouble, he's going to be playing, upwards of 38 minutes a night. So that's only, like, Dwight Howard's only going to be playing like 10 or 12. You know what I mean? So with that, maybe that leads to more Thybulle minutes. As you mentioned, he goes to Korkmaz because he wants shooting. Maybe as the series goes on and Joel Embiid is on the floor more, maybe we do see more of Matisse Thybulle. Because I tend to agree. It's just he's too impactful of a player. Granted, it is only on one end of the floor, but he's so impactful, and he can create offense with his defense. So I think that in itself is worth having him on the floor more. I do think, like, as much as I don't love him playing with Dwight and Ben, I do think he can play with Ben, and then that just makes you so good defensively. And then if Joel Embiid is on the back line, I mean, that's, you could have some really, really good defensive lineups with Simmons, Thibault, and Embiid, and then, name your other two at that point. That could be a really, really, really potent defensive unit. So I am curious if that's an outlier, or if that's something, we see going forward. If maybe this is Matisse Thybulle's role. I don't know. I guess we're going to have to, we can ask Dark Rivers, but we might just have to wait and see. I want to say thank you so much to my guest, Noah Levick. You can check out all of his stuff at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. I know you just wrote an article about Ben Simmons, the stuff we talked about off the top, but if you want to get more in-depth analysis from Noah in that regard, I implore you to go check it out. You can find him on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle again, so everyone knows?
Just at Noah Levick.
There it is. Me and you both, simple, just at and the name. That's it. Nothing fancy there. But no, thank you so much for joining me, man. I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate all of you guys checking in, coming in for a landing. We will be keep updating you throughout the playoffs. Please continue to download, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I will talk to you guys next time.